Welcome to TESO Consulting Group's DEI podcast series, Why Is It So Hard? Shining Through the Shadow of Resistance. I'm Dr. Tonya Breland.
And I am Erika.
Welcome back. I'm Dr. Tonya Breland.
And I'm Erika. And this is our podcast series, Why Is It So Hard? Shining Through the Shadows of Resistance. Our new series is about justice for all. And today we have, as you can see, a special guest.
Yes, we do.
Yes. This is our friend Curtis Myers, and he's the founder and CEO of Aspire Youth Development. And we're just going to ask him to talk a little bit about, the work that he does. And we're going to talk today about workforce equity.
Thanks, Erika. Hey, everyone, my name is Curtis Myers. I'm the founder of Aspire Youth Development, as Erika said. I started it in 2003. At the time, I was in the youth development space, and I wanted to have a little bit more autonomy with some consulting work. So I began Aspire to kind of bridge the gap in some of the areas where I saw that young people weren't being served well, specifically around leadership development, and it kind of morphed into doing some work around workforce development over time.
Mm. We'd love to hear a little bit more about, how those young people weren't being served well. So what were some of the things that you were seeing that really kind of pricked your heart, if you will?
I think for me, it was looking at how we prepare young people for the future in terms of looking at the unique makeup that they bring to the table, and how do we speak to them in those ways, and then how do we design engaging trainings that really speak to their different learning styles. So for instance, for us, we really focused on a lot of experiential learning, a lot of reflective learning, small group learning, less lecture style learning. And so that's kind of how we set up our leadership training. So you can teach a young person leadership principles with a PowerPoint, or you can teach them through a PowerPoint with an activity, and then with them kind of reflecting by themselves, and then also having group sharing. And so that's was our methodology. And we started that work and just kind of evolved, working with some critical partners in schools, government organizations, workforce development boards. And that kind of led itself into, can you do more to prepare young people for the world of work? Mm-hmm. And that's kind of how we got into more of the workforce side.
Mm-hmm. So when you get your students, like the young people, are they referred to you from schools? Are they referred, how could they be a part of Aspire?
So right now we have two major programs, the Young Parents Career Exploration Program, and then also our Young Adult Career Initiative. And both of those are federal WIOA funded programs. So the young people that are in those programs have to meet a special eligibility criteria. So there's 6 criteria. They have to be either a school dropout, somebody who's pregnant or parenting as a young adult between ages of 16 and 24. They can be a young person who has a disability, a physical or learning disability, somebody who's been involved in the court system, somebody who's been involved in foster care. So what we do is we reach out to the people who can speak to those audiences. So obviously school guidance counselors refer us young people who either have dropped out, who are unemployed or underemployed, and they graduated in the last year or two. We have probation officers who say, hey, I have a young person who's on probation. They need some help kind of getting into the workforce, getting prepared for it. And so probation officers will refer stuff. DCP&P will refer foster care students and foster care young people. So we look to specialize people who know that audience, who would have those relationships. And then also just talking to young people so that they now refer their friends, because thank you for helping me kind of get my high school equivalency. Thank you for helping me get my first, job. And now I'm going to tell my friend about it as well.
I love that the youth that you are reaching out to are predominantly those who are at the margins of society.
Yeah.
Those who society might turn their backs on, might stigmatize, might discriminate against. And I just think that what you're offering just sounds like something that says, listen, I see you, I see you, young person, yes, you may have some situations in your life that may make it more difficult for you, but you're still valuable, you're still worthy. It's still important that you have the skills that are necessary. Talk to us a little bit more about, some of the specific work, even if you have a success story that, that you'd love to share, that'd be great to hear.
Yeah. So I think when When I think about the work that we do, right, it's helping the young people realize potential that they did not know they had, right? So oftentimes the young people that we have been, by the grant guidelines, they use terminologies such as at risk. But I don't really believe in that because I think all our young people are at risk, right? So some of these young people have just had to overcome greater trauma than maybe other people, but they have to be equipped. So I think about this one young lady who, she's very difficult background and young mom, but she wanted to do better for herself, but she needed the guidance. So when she was in school, she had a guidance counselor, right, who would kind of help map her path for her to some degree if she took advantage of it. But once you leave the school setting, who is that for you?
Right.
So that's kind of where our team, our care and case managers kind of support the young people. Like, let me help you think of a plan for you that's specific to you. So here's how we're going to work with you. Here are the barriers that you see in your life right now. Here are the strengths that we know from talking to you, right? So let's see, and here's where you want to go. So how do we kind of put all those together? So I think about this young lady who wanted to get into the medical field, but did not know how and what. So we exposed her to some different training opportunities, and she actually went into a phlebotomy training. Now, honestly, I didn't know what phlebotomy was, right? And I found out, like her, my staff was telling me, this training that she could go through. And it was the people who draw blood and do all that kind of stuff in the hospital. I'm like, yeah, you got to get certified to do that. It was only a few months of training to become certified, take the test, and you're now certified. And she was able to get a job, excuse me, making like $25 an hour at Cooper Hospital. So like no student loan debt, right? A short-term commitment to kind of get her started in healthcare. And then if she wants to then pursue college to become an RN or LPN, she can do that. But at least she's in a job in the career field that she wants with a wage that can kind of help sustain her as she makes other decisions. And for me, that's what we really want to do. We know that there's kids that come to us and say, I just want to get a job at McDonald's. And I'm like, that's fine. But how do you become a manager at McDonald's? How do you move forward? How do you use your time at McDonald's to develop these skills that might get you into a different culinary opportunity? So that's kind of how we look at it.
Yeah, yeah. When we think about like equity and access and fairness and opportunity, like where do you see clearly when kids come to you, like they're missing one or all of those pieces? Like where do you see the breakdown? Like why don't they have that already?
Yeah, I think a lot of the times when I think about the young people that we serve, they often come from situations and experiences that are beyond their control. Like I can't control that I was in foster care, right? I can't control, maybe that I have this diagnosis, whether it's mental health, physical, disability. And sometimes some of the environments that they come from have led them to make difficult choices. I remember specifically one time I had a young man in my office and he was waiting for the case manager to meet with him, and he was just talking and he said, yeah, I had to go help my father clean up the blood. My brother was shot in his barbershop. And he said it just like that. No feeling, no emotion. And I was like shocked. I'm like, how do you go through that and you're still here for an appointment? And, just talking to some of these young people and their stories, I think it's too easy for people to look at people on the margins and say it's their fault, it's they caused it, as opposed to seeing there's some things that are just outside of our control. Even when a young person drops out of high school, sometimes it's just other things that are really impacting them. And if we can get, I think now we're moving more into that trauma-informed care, so people are starting to understand that a little bit better. But there's so many things that impact young people that I think we just kind of push under the rug, like just, hey, just and still succeed. I'm like, no, that's tough to bounce back from that stuff. And it takes just takes some extra effort. But I think as a society, it's a good investment. Interestingly enough, and this is not a political statement, but this WIOA Workforce Innovation Opportunity Act was one of the signatures of the Obama administration, because the philosophy was if we invest some money in our most marginalized young people, ages 16 to 24, who have these challenges, we can help break the cycle of poverty and then their dependence on the system. So we're going to invest some dollars now that's going to save us money later. And I just thought that was such a wise use of federal dollars and policy decisions, because it definitely is, being spending a little bit now that saves you a ton of money later. It's preventative maintenance for society, for our federal fiscal policies and everything else like that. So.
Yeah, I'm glad that you said that because you're really talking about systems and some of the systemic oppression that the young people have experienced. But then you see where there's a remedy, that with the program that you just mentioned or the policy that you just mentioned, to addressing some of those systemic issues that the young people are experiencing and have come out of and that have created challenges for them or put barriers in their way or made it very difficult for them to access the opportunities that your organization offers. Talk a little bit more about that systemic piece. And I love what you also said about it's an investment.
It's an investment, yeah. It's not a cost, it's an investment. So I think when I think about the different systems, the systems oftentimes work well for a large group of people, right? So the typical educational system works well for 75% of our young people, right? I have a family that makes sure I get up, I can get to school, et cetera, et cetera. But what does it do for those families, for those young people who are outside the margins, right? And it just takes the effort of a few to kind of like, well, we can tweak this, right? We've got to have some grace for this because while this policy makes sense for 75% of the population, this 25% is a pretty decent amount. And so we need to think about where is the gaps, where are the changes, where's the flexibility that we can have. Even when I look at court involved kids and you see like the challenges that happens when somebody gets a charge and how that charge sticks with them. So there's going to be an expungement clinic on Thursday that our team will be at, bringing young people to help them understand like how to get some of these things off you. Because once you've got to check that box, like I get it. If you're an employer, you want to make sure that you have certain types of employees and certain safety measures. But I think the challenge is sometimes somebody's one decision shouldn't have to shape their lives. And so that's a systemic issue that we got to think, how do we do that? I remember as a professional working in Camden City, and this is one of those experiences that really bothered me. We wanted to hire folks from the community. The large nonprofit that I was working for had very clear policies about background checks. And I said, that's fair. I said, but we would not, if anybody had anything on their background checks, they were basically, we can't hire you. And I was like, man, if we're going to work in the city of Camden with so many young people and people who've just been impacted by the justice system, we're going to have to tweak that. And so I had to literally challenge HR to say, I think we've got to come up with some other standards, right? And so I had to advocate for what if there's letters of support? What if there's context? And I remember this one person that we hired who was exceptional community leader, had a definite past, but it was their past. And they more than made amends for it. They've been critical in the well-being of that community. I said, having them in our organization would be an asset. And so I literally had to get a letter of recommendation from somebody pretty high up in the government, which was kind of embarrassing, but it made my point was this person is worth it. And so how do you look past some of the systems that have been set up to protect, but also keep others out? Like, how do you navigate that tension and be able to see people as people? Yeah, that's a challenge.
Yeah, I love the idea of addressing barriers because I think sometimes we don't realize when we think about systems, we don't realize the barriers to success that significant numbers of the population actually have. And so you talked about, kind of like the background check and what we do with the background check as a barrier. In the work that you do, can you also talk about some of the other barriers that you help young people overcome?
So I'll give you a simple one. So obviously in Burlington County, it's a very large geographic county, and we don't have a good public transportation system. Suburban community. So if your parents drive or your parents have a car they'll let you use, you can get around. That's a big if,
That's a bit
right? So, sometimes we've had people say, well, just give them a bus pass. Great, makes a lot of sense. if you live on the bus route, and if the bus route goes where you want to go. So how do you overcome that? So we've done stuff like, hey, we've advocated and used Uber and Lyft for some of our young people to get them to critical appointments. We've, everyone has, moved to the virtual world since the pandemic, but we were using Zoom before the pandemic and trying to figure out what are some of the things that we can do in person. So you can come to our office for this workshop on financial literacy, or you can log in this way, and so we'll make sure you have a laptop and a hotspot. We'll do those things to overcome those barriers, because you can't assume that everyone's got technology at their home. You can't assume that everybody's got Comcast or this or that. Like, you just don't know. And sometimes some of the solutions are simple. I remember this one young man. He had a job, a good job, at a distribution center, and he had people who were willing to pick him up, co-workers. They didn't have will pick up, but the getting back was the problem because his shift ended earlier. And he said, if I just had a bicycle, I could bike from the bus stop. I said, that's all you need? So $86 will make sure that you can keep this job. It was an $86 payment to Walmart to get this young man a bike that helped move his life forward. So it's about thinking about, yes, the system, the transportation system is good for some. So how do we fill those gaps for those that's not? So let's figure out those things. I think that's the mindset when we are trying to really move people forward is, not all systems are bad, but the way systems can be implemented and the way they can be rigorously defended will keep people out just by their existence.
I love how you describe that. And I also like how, you using partners like, Uber, for example, to provide access for, some of your young people to get back and forth to work. I know there's probably a lot of other partnerships, like your organization does a good portion of that work, but I imagine that, it's not all on you. So can you talk about some of the collaboration and the partnerships that happen with, other organizations?
Yeah, I think for us, collaboration is key, right? We can't do the work. We can't help move the needle in the lives of these young people by ourselves. It's too big of a push. Sure. And so for us, we partner with organizations like Rowan College of Burlington County. Instead of us offering high school equivalency classes, we actually send the young people to RCBC or to Bordentown. They have an evening program, or Helms Academy. They've got it online. So we have 3 partners to help the young people with their high school equivalency. We partner with other businesses to give young people subsidized work experience. So if we have somebody who's never had a job, they have to get work experience. So we'll say, hey, listen, we will pay their wages for 8 weeks if you would just give them a job and kind of just intern them, kind of help them get familiar. So we, even like our next door neighbor, Ivy Physical Therapy, they're like, hey man, we'll give a kid a chance. And so a young person was able to work there and see, what does a physical therapist do all day, and get some experience and get used to showing up on time and filling out timesheets and all the things that you can talk about in abstract, but you've got to have the real world experience. And so somebody can say, hey, this young person can do it. So between the businesses, between the educational institutions are big partners for us for services, training providers. So, young people can get certification training from, BCIT, Merit Academy, all these different places. So we literally, I think the way I think of Aspire when I talk to young people and I think about our program, I said we're a hybrid between your high school guidance counselor and your nagging aunt. And so the reason I say that is a high school guidance counselor will kind of give you a roadmap. Hey, you got to turn in your applications by this date. You got to take the SAT by this date. Your nagging aunt is the one that says, boy, what you doing? Stay on top of that.
Right.
And so our staff kind of says, let's come up with a roadmap together. And let me help you identify who can help you. Let me introduce you. And then let me stay on top of you to make sure that you're doing those things. So we don't just say, hey, go over to RCBC and enroll in ABE. Say, listen, let's get on the phone. We're going to call Ms. Val together. We're going to make sure you know your schedule. And then I'm going to check in with you every Friday and check in with Ms. Val to say, hey, he missed 2 sessions this week. What's going on with that? We're going to connect you with employers that we know and introduce you to others. We're part of the Chamber of Commerce. And so trying to just get you in front of people to move you forward. So partnership and collaboration is critical. We do not, we're probably more like a good point guard. We don't score a lot, but we keep the ball moving.
That's great.
That's what we try to do.
Yeah, no, that's good.
When you think about like success, What are some of your, like, how do you know that this is working? Like,
Yeah.
what are some of your measures of success?
So we have very clear success measures from the grant, right? From the grant side, right? Basically there's three things they're measuring us on. Did the young person have a job and they kept it for 90 days? Did the young person get into a certification training or enroll in college? So something that's post-secondary that could increase their earning potential. Or did the young person join the military? So they've got a career pathway for success. So those are like the big bucket measures. But to me, I always tell our staff, can we find the small victories?
Sure.
Like, so to me, the small victories are like, hey, his attendance went up. He only missed 1 day of class this week. Man, celebrate that. You know, this young person completed 6 applications. It was hard to get you to do 1, but you did 6. Like, celebrate that. If you do 6, you're going to get a job. Like, it's, you know, so it's looking for those small wins to just encourage them to keep making steps towards the big picture.
Yeah.
You know, as an entrepreneur, we know that it's a lot of work, you know, to become an entrepreneur. And sometimes the pathway for young people is not the traditional pathway of finding a job or going to school or going to the military. Sometimes it's starting their own business. So if you were to advise a group of young people around like what they can do to become an entrepreneur, a successful entrepreneur like you or like us, what would you, how would you advise that young person?
So we do 2 things. Number one, all our young people are offered the opportunity to go through the Build Ed training program, which is a training that talks about how you add value to build entrepreneurship. So the idea is learn what it means to build value. You can practice building value by your job, but this will teach you how to build value to create a business if you're interested. We then also will connect them with resources at like Rutgers Small Business Development Center, Rutgers Camden, SBDC. So we encourage entrepreneurship. That's actually one of the 14 elements that we are prescribed to offer the young people. So with our funding, it's like a buffet. You got to offer these young people these 14 dishes, and hopefully some of them they'll stick with. But entrepreneurship is one. So I think number one, find your passion, and then work your passion hard and learn how to monetize your passion. Because I know for me, you know, I was a youth serving professional for a number of years, worked at some big nonprofits, had some decent roles. But when I started Aspire, which was just my part-time thing, which is something I did by accident, but it's actually the best way to do entrepreneurship, right? Build it when you don't have to eat off of what you create. So for years, I was able to build Aspire, build my reputation, build my brand, build relationships while I worked for another organization. And so when it was time for me to move into Aspire full time, I wasn't starting from zero.
Yeah.
And I had, you know, and I didn't need the money. I had already invested the money in Aspire. So I could then, when I needed to draw the salary, I could. Often when times with entrepreneurs, people have a great idea and they think I should go into business. And I'm like, no, you got to develop that idea. You got to start bringing that idea to life, because it's going to cost twice as much as you think. And it's going to take twice as long to do it. And so until you start doing it, it does, you know, you're going to struggle. Like I didn't have to take out any loans, you know, any SBA loans, though I do have a lot of credit from my bank and certain things like that. But because I basically worked part-time in Aspire for about 10 years. Yeah, like it was very, very part-time. People would call it a side hustle, but I was thinking further. I just didn't know when it would happen. And then when it happened, when it was time to leave my other full-time employment, like I was, you know, mentally ready, but I fiscally understood the business enough, and God's grace was good. Just opportunities began to come, but and it still built slowly. So right now we have a team of 8 full-time staff, but in 2014 when I went full-time, it was just me. And you know, and it's been a great ride. But when I think about, you know, in 2003, I started because one of my school relationships said, hey, you know, the person that has your role in this other organization, they don't do the leadership training. Can we hire you as a consultant to do leadership training with our young people? So it was literally bit by bit, like, and then now we're doing fairly well.
It's a great model. Yeah, it's wonderful. So something that we talk about a lot, I'm just curious about with you. So we do a lot of work in the business, right?
Hmm.
Like doing the work. But we often talk about like wanting more time to work on
On
the
the
business,
business.
right? And so could you talk about a little bit about how you manage that?
Yeah, I had to learn that I had to make an investment in my ability to work on the business. So I actually joined this group called the Alternative Board, which is a group of business owners that meet and talk about their businesses. So it's basically like a small group that talks about like, here's my challenges, and we bounce ideas off of each other. And it helps us. It's like a mastermind group. Yeah, and it really helps you think strategically. And then I meet with a coach who really just says, let's talk about Aspire. Let's talk about your plans for the future. Let's talk about how your strategies of how you get there. I think it's hard to do because you can get caught up into like the minutia of what you have to do. But as leaders of any organization, you know, the captain has got to be able to understand how to steer the ship, how to hoist the sails, how to, use the oars and everything else. But ultimately, this captain has to be able to sit on that top of that deck and be able to command and see stuff. And so that's the hard part. Like, yes, I take out the trash almost every day at my office, but I also spend that time of strategic thinking, like, what's next? What's the next RFP? What's the next direction that we want to go? And so for me, one of the things I've been working on is, for example, is while we offer the services that we offer are phenomenal for the at-risk population, or what folks call the at-risk population, but it's the trainings and the content and what we offer is for every young person. My daughter's included. Like getting young people prepared for the world of work is not as simple as I did good in school, now I'll go get a job. Like you have to understand time management. You have to understand emotional intelligence as it deals with your workplace, professionalism. And, you know, you'd be surprised what people will post on Facebook about their employer and not understand why that's not a good idea.
Right.
Yeah.
Right? You understand? Like, I get it. You're allowed to say this to your friends, but you can't say this at work.
Right.
You can't text. I mean, you can't write emails at work with text language. So, how are you doing with an R? Like that's not,
Right.
that's fine texting with your friends, but that's not professional
Right. That's
communication.
Yeah.
And so it's all those kind of skills that like, how do you transition from the academic world to the real world? So now we're like positioning ourselves to talk to companies to say, hey, we want Aspire to help us recruit our young talent and prepare them before they come into our company. So that's kind of like the direction I've been working on and saying like, yeah, the stuff we do, it helps everyone.
Yeah.
Financial literacy, balancing your budget, all that stuff, like every young person needs that.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, what you're talking about is really creating an environment that provides access.
Yes.
Access to the opportunities that otherwise might not have been available to these young people because they are the ones that tend to be at the margins of society.
Absolutely.
So, like you are a part of the solution. Like your organization is a part of the solution to the inequities that exist in society. And we're grateful for that because we talk about, the inequities in society all the time and in every avenue and every aspect of society. And so when we think about, justice in the workforce, it sounds to me, and I think that Erika would agree that Aspire is the answer to the injustices in the workforce.
Yeah, I think you bring up a good point because I don't think people think about justice in the workforce,
Right.
but it's real. Like there is so much injustice in terms of access and opportunity. You think about, I'll just give you a simple thing that we talk about a lot of times, this idea of the paper ceiling, that sometimes people will not, opportunities are not made available if you don't have a degree, but really the emphasis should be what about the skills? So I may not have a degree, but if I come out the military and I've gotten these skills, I understand distribution, I understand logistics, but I don't have a degree. I've got the skills. Am I not valuable to your organization? Or are you just going to create this artificial barrier for me? And so I think it's about how do we help, and how do we help organizations realize to get out your own way because you're underperforming because you don't have your best people in the space
Yeah.
because you're defining best the wrong way.
Yeah. Yeah. So this has been, I have a lot more questions,
Yeah.
but I
Just
think
stay
I'll stay for
afterwards.
part two. I'll be back for part two.
thank you so much for this wonderful
Yes,
conversation.
thank you.
And thank you, for just sharing your insights on workforce equity, but also entrepreneurship.
Yes.
Because I think those are two areas that, we continue to really uncover and help people gain access. But we're going to have to end this conversation now.
Yeah.
We may have Curtis Myers back
We might.
for
We
another
might just do that.
conversation. Yeah. So thank you for joining us. I'm Erika Leek.
And I'm Tonya Breland.